Hello again, and welcome to another edition of Forum for a Better Understanding. Usually it's an interdisciplinary conversation of interfaith, but today what we're going to do is speak with two scientists about something that is very much impacting our lives as we speak, the California water crisis. We're going to talk about sustainability. We're going to talk about the issues of population, about agriculture and the environment. And we're going to use a lot of slides to help illustrate some of their main findings. I hope you enjoy this program and that you'll decide to do something about it at its end, because this is an issue we don't want to just bring up, but we would like to help to take steps to resolve. We have two doctors here who are going to share with us. The first is David Cehrs, who has a Ph.D. in hydrology, which for those that don't speak Greek, that would mean water. And he's a professor at Reedley College, and we're very glad to have him here. He's also a member of the Kings River Conservation District as a board member. And across from him would be Dr. Bob Merrill, a professor emeritus from California State University, Fresno, in the Department of Geology. And we're glad that both of these great men are going to share with us their passion for a problem that they want to solve. David, can you start by telling us the gravity of the water situation here in the valley?
Well, we'll start off with that water is a finite resource. We as humans can't make more of it, and from a political standpoint, you can't make or you can't get new water, and politicians are desperately trying for new water.
Yeah, and water is a very valuable and finite resource, but there are a couple of other interesting aspects about it. It's renewable annually through what we refer to as the water cycle. That is, water that falls on the ground as rain or snow, then runs, a lot of it enters river systems, lakes, and runs off into the ocean, and it fits back into that cycle. And then there's water that infiltrates and slowly percolates down in the ground and ultimately reaches what we call the water table and is stored in what we call an aquifer. And that's renewable annually. But water is also variable in time and space. And we might look at this on a map of the United States, in which we see that in the west especially, we're in a very low rainfall area here. The orange colors that you're looking at, a very low rainfall, 0 to 25 centimeters per year. The bluer areas are wetter. And so that's the spatial distribution of water. And then it also varies, as we all know, we have wet years and dry years, so there's a temporal or time variation to it.
But basically, it's a finite resource.
It's a finite resource, and one of the problems is you can't have infinite growth on a finite resource. And to demonstrate that, let's take a look at an analogy. If you have surface water and compare that to your checking account, and then you take groundwater and compare that to your savings account, and if you take more water out of your savings than you put in, it becomes unsustainable.
You know, that slide, let's look at that, because that's something everyone can handle, is to know you can't spend what you don't have, even though we try to.
Okay. Yeah, in looking at the surface water, as Dr. Cehrs said, it's like a checking account, and groundwater is your savings account. And we all know that as we move water from the savings account, as we move from the savings account to the checking account, you can't overdraft your savings account, or the bank will notify you that you've been bad.
Now, there's more slides now that you have, Bob, that are going to show us exactly the groundwater situation here in the valley.
Yes, and if we could go to the next one, what we have is as water slowly moves downward, we mentioned earlier, from the ground surface and precipitation or melting snow, enters the groundwater system. Ultimately, we have the lower part here you see as a blue color. That's the aquifer. That's where we store water. The water that we have in the valley has been stored in the groundwater aquifer over a long period of time. The boundary that you saw there between the upper part, which was dry and the pore space is filled with air, is above the water table. As we pump water out for our usage by pumping the groundwater, which is a very reliable source of water, we end up dropping the water table. We're pulling out of that aquifer. and we're pulling out much faster than it's being replenished. And if we could go to the next slide, you'll see, for example, in some areas and during a wet period, the water table is relatively high. You see two wells here, a shallow well and a deep well. And then you see where the water table intersects the surface of the ground. You have a spring. You also see that here we have a stream that is flowing year-round because the water table is seeping into the bottom of that stream, keeping the water level in the stream relatively constant. And then in the next one, you'll see during a dry period what happens. The water table drops a bit, especially as we pump water out. And in many cases, we've seen this in the valley over years. The shallow well goes dry, and you have a choice of deepening it or moving to another water supply somewhere, which we usually don't have. And then if we could go to the slide that illustrates the situation here in the valley, actually the water table is deep under the land surface. And so we have the river, like the San Joaquin or other streams, are actually leaking water or losing water to feed the aquifer. As we pump water out in that well now, though, we're pulling down the water table. We're taking water out of that glass. And you might also notice that that blue area was the aquifer. At the bottom of it, there is a bottom to that aquifer, and we really need to keep that in mind because it's like we have a glass filled with water and we're pumping it out, and ultimately we're going to reach the bottom of that if we're not careful because we're overdrafting, we're mining the groundwater, mining our savings account.
And we've been doing this since 1945.
That's correct. The next slide will show a depth to water beneath the Fresno area. The red line is Consolidated Irrigation District, that's Selma, Fowler. The green is Fresno Irrigation District, including Fresno and Clovis. The blue one shows Kings River Conservation District, which is a larger area. The drought of record is on the left, top left. It's 1924 to 34. The water table recovers. But since then, the water table has been dropping. And it's been dropping, depending upon where the area is. You see those trend lines, anywhere from half a foot a year to 9/10 of a foot a year. So as our checking and savings accounts show, we've been unsustainable for quite some time. Now, the next slide shows that this is not only through time but through space. And what I'm demonstrating here is that some of the major drops in the water table have been both beneath urban areas, Fresno, Clovis, in excess of 100 feet of drop in 55 years, and beneath agricultural areas where it's dropping on the order of 160 feet in some areas. So those are the results, but let's look at a couple of things. The inputs, the supply, and the demand inputs on these things. The first one shows the first input is precipitation. You'll notice it's variable through time, different amounts of rain, various years, but the trend line says that we've actually been getting wetter with time in Fresno, which is interesting. The next one shows the Kings River runoff, and this is coming off of the Cehrs. Again, variable through time, but it's pretty flat, so it's pretty constant through time. The next slide shows irrigation district deliveries. So this is what the irrigation districts are actually putting on the surface in their area. The red is Consolidated, the green is Fresno Irrigation District, and again, the trend line says they're both putting more water on with time in their area. So those are some of our inputs. So let's look at some demands. The next slide, the green line shows the agricultural demands. It peaked in about 1982 and has been declining since. It's declining at the expense of the bottom line, the yellow one, which is urban growth. So as we take ag land out of production and put houses on it, the demand for the houses is taking over what was ag. And if you look at the very top blue line, that's our total demand. Total demand peaked in about 1985, dipped a bit, and we're back up to a very high demand again. Two things that go into this, though. Our demand is so high that in 3 out of 4 years we're using all of our surface water. And the other thing is that when we look at correlation of statistics, the best correlation with the decline in the groundwater is with population increase.
Yes, and when we look at population increase, we're looking at urban growth. And we've all seen various comments about how fast Fresno, Clovis, the area is growing, and various projections. And if we could go to the next slide. We see, I've sort of borrowed this, and I want to show you that you can get a lot of this information, oftentimes pieces of it out of the Fresno Bee. This is information from several years ago, the Fresno Bee. You can also get it out of your water bill, the flyers that come with it. Fresno's water supplies are limited. In 45, the water level was up at about 30 feet or so of depth below the surface.
Wow.
In 99, it's dropped down to 150, 130 in places, and continuing to drop even more. And again, as I said earlier, we're overdrafting this. We're taking it out much, much faster than it's being replenished. So we're in a serious drop in our water supply.
And it's only going to be exacerbated with the whole demographic growth, the whole population explosion here.
Yes, that's the very real problem. Our demand is increasing and our demand is exceeding the supply on a finite resource. And if we could go to the next slide, what you have here is the Fresno County blueprint for 2050. And this has been developed by very good inputs. The gray area is the existing urban area and suburban, the existing home and plots of area that our people live in. The yellow is what is projected to expand out of the Fresno Clovis area and even out of Sanger by 2050.
Wow.
Those are going to be added homes, adding to the demand. And what I want to show you is that is really what we've been talking about is unsustainable. It's this land use is really a population growth when we add these developments. And if we could go to the next one, what I have here, again borrowing from the Fresno Bee, these articles were taken in 94 and 95. And it shows that just across the river in Madera County, wells were going dry, yet the supervisors up there approved a 9,500 acre subdivision in an area that has a very thin aquifer and is running all out of water in 94.
So this information is actually known to the reading public. It's not only professors who know these things.
Yeah. All that we have done is we've gone into the details, actual measurements and quantities rather than an overview. But these overviews are well presented in the Bee, and sometimes we can construct maps from the data that's there. And let me just show you an aerial shot here in the next one. This is the San Joaquin River area today, Millerton Lake on the right, and at the top Madera at the south, Fresno County. And then let's look at it projecting forward. In the next one, you'll see the colored areas are developments that have already been approved or are in progress. And so we will see, unfortunately, in the future, pictures like that one in the center with urban development right up to the edges of the river. And again, where is the water going to come from? What are we going to do about this population growth and their demand? Because we're going to take it from either we're going to have to give up some as individuals or agriculture is going to have to give up some.
And that's what we're going to do right now is take a break so that in the second half of the program, having looked at the dire situation, and I hope it's become clear through those many slides, that it is a unsustainable reality. We've skated by, we've gotten by, as they say, but it's going to come back and definitely hurt us. So why don't we give ourselves a break, come back, and have the professors help us see possible solutions to this very difficult situation. We can't avoid it. Stay tuned.
KNXT thanks all its loyal viewers and respected businesses who have supported your Catholic television station. Now you can support KNXT with program underwriting by having your name, your company's name, or organization associated with your favorite program. Detailed information about you or your company will appear before and after each program or day part you select. Keep the quality and spiritual message alive and make a difference. Call 559-488-7440 today or go online at knxt.tv to find out more about program underwriting on KNXT.
Welcome back to our second part of our program on the water crisis here in California, more specifically in the Central Valley, right here where we live. We've looked at the dire situation. I think it's become clear through what the professors have said and through their slides that it is an unavoidable reality. It's undeniable, but it is solvable. there is a way to come up with some possible scenarios for solution. So let's leave Dr. David Cehrs to be able to present for us a little bit about how could we ever get water sustainability in the Fresno County, David?
All right. I've got a huge data set that we've developed over time, and to achieve sustainability within Fresno County, and the first slide will show you this, we have to reduce our total demand by 15%. And that is absolutely huge. That's a huge amount of water. Yeah. To show you how this might happen, I've given you several different scenarios, and this is a look at some of these possible scenarios. Scenario 1 uses our current uses. Domestically in the Fresno area, we're using 275 gallons per capita per day. I have data for Clovis that says that 56% of that use is for landscaping.
Oh.
So it's actually quite large. Agricultural use currently in the area, and it's about 758,000 areas for the study area, is 2.83 acre-feet per acre. To achieve sustainability with that current use, the default option is to get rid of irrigated agriculture, and we'd have to get rid of about 110,000 acres of the 758,000 irrigated acres of ag. Scenario 2, which was on that same slide, I've arbitrarily cut 200 gallons off of the domestic use. I just did that on my own.
Let's do it.
And then agricultural use, I lowered it to 2.7. And the reason I've only gone to 2.7 is one of the problems with reducing irrigation to agriculture is that you wind up building soil salinity. And if the soil salinity gets high enough, you can no longer grow anything on it. So there's a possibility you could go lower, but I don't know exactly where that's going to be. So if I do that one, you can get rid of 16,000 acres of irrigated land.
Now, what happens if the population increases?
And that's the dicey part. Again, the blueprint says we're going to add 1 million people by the year 2050. So I've done 2 more scenarios using the additional population growth. Scenario 3 uses our same numbers that we're using today, the 275 gallons per person per day, ag use at 2.83. Again, to be sustainable, we'll have to get rid of 225,000 acres of irrigated land, and that's about 1/3 of our irrigated acreage currently.
And then what would there be left to do in the valley?
So it's a substantial hit. Scenario 4, I've done something a little different. Urban use, I've cut to 35 gallons per capita per day. And why do I use 35? The country of the Netherlands uses 35. England, Southeast England and London uses 35. They're wet. Melbourne, Australia, and Brisbane, Australia are in year 8 of a drought. They're using less than 35 gallons per capita per day because they have to. Yeah. But what that means is 4-minute showers and no landscaping. Again, I've cut ag use to 2.7 acre-foot per acre, and we have to get rid of about 20,000 acres of irrigated land. The thing that comes out of this is that there's no winners. Nobody's getting more water. Everybody's using less water. So let's take a look at the competition for water then. The competition for water, the environment originally had lots of water. The San Joaquin River flowed year-round. There were birds as far as the eye could see, 13-foot sturgeons in the river, salmon. The environment lost the water in the 1920s to the 1950s with the addition of the canals and the dams. And this went both to urban use, think Hetch Hetchy and San Francisco, as well as agricultural use, think Friant Dam and the Friant Kern Canal. Currently, agriculture is losing its water to domestic demands. The Imperial Irrigation District is sending water now to Southern California, San Diego, LA. Also, the Metropolitan Water District in Southern California is looking to Butte County in the Sacramento Valley for more water. But one of the things that happens is that agriculture has a problem. They cannot go after municipal water because within the water code of California, the highest and best use of water is always domestic use. And because of this, agriculture can't go after that domestic use. This then gives us the fight, the fish versus people, the jobs versus people. that we're seeing currently, because agriculture has no other place to go than for the little bit of remaining environmental water. So I think that we can agree that California pretty much has a water problem that'll show on the next slide. And as we get increasing population, that will demand more food. But at the same time, we're going to have declining irrigated agricultural lands producing less food. One of the thoughts is, where's the food going to come from? Well, imports. And we do import a lot of food, but those imports depend upon a foreign country or entity having surplus food to ship to us. Australia, for instance, used to ship us quite a bit, but they're no longer doing it because they're in year 8 of a drought. Also, it takes cheap energy to ship food. And as we know, a couple years ago, energy went up quite a bit, and we may not be shipping as much food as we used to. So if you have no imports, then you wind up with a food problem. And our next slide shows sort of a simplistic view of this problem, that you can either grow food or you can grow people, but you can't do both. So what would happen if you start growing food? Well, if you grow food, you're going to have to stop or limit growth, population growth or building. The building industry will be hurt. There's going to be an economic slowdown, and there'll be a change in lifestyle. So economics and lifestyle are in there. If you decide to grow people, food will become more expensive. There'll be less total food. Our choices of food are going to go from fruits and vegetables to beans and grain, which you can dry land farm. And again, the thing that falls out of this is there's going to be an economic hit as well as a lifestyle change. Yeah. So the populace, on our next slide, will show the populace faces a huge choice. They really don't know this choice is coming, and there's no good choice. There's not a choice C that says everything's going to be wonderful. And the other thing is that either choice will affect us greatly, both economically and from a lifestyle standpoint. But there's another question that we need to ask as a society. Is there not a strategic value to growing our own food? And if we look at the countries of Japan, they grow their own rice, and for a reason. If they're ever cut off, they're an island nation, if they're ever cut off, they can feed themselves. France and Poland subsidize their agriculture. They've been through a couple of wars. They know what it's like to have no food. They are growing their own food for a reason. Another thing that's more interesting is that China, Saudi Arabia, and South Korea are buying agricultural lands worldwide for their own food importation. Their populations are growing, and they're running out of water to grow their own food for those increasing populations. So there's an interesting question there, and we can grow food in California.
And we have 4 minutes to tell people how we're going to.
Okay, let me, if we could put up the next slide, we'll see that this is revisiting that precipitation slide. And again, I want to emphasize in the American Southwest, and in which California is a large part of, we have low precipitation. So we have a limit on the water supply to begin with, and we're overusing the groundwater. And in the next slide, you'll see the heights of the states here, the individual states. Their height is proportional to their water use on an annual basis. And you can see why it's a problem in California, even Texas, Colorado, and Arizona. But California, Arizona, the Southwest is one of the fastest growing areas in the U.S., and also Florida. But the water use is not sustainable. And if we look at the next slide, we will see that we've got a future problem with climate change. And climate change means we're going to have less water available. Much of that water is going to come in California as rainfall in the Cehrs instead of as snow, producing problems for storage. We're not going to have the reliability of the supply when we get more rain. If we do have a wet year, we're going to have to dump more of that water out of our reservoirs for downstream saving people from flooding. So we're going to have a serious problem with the coming climate change, and we've already seen this in various parts of the world this year, the high variability of weather conditions.
And we're going to leave you with some solutions. And there are solutions, but none of them are easy solutions. The first one that I'll show you on the slide is legislative apportionment. This means that the state legislature has to allocate water to each and every one of us. One of the problems with this is that we'll all get less, and we'll all be mad at them and probably not vote to re-elect them. The second one is administrative allocation. This can occur at a statewide level through Department of Water Resources. It could occur at a county level or even a district. Again, we'll have to allocate water to different entities. Again, there will be less water allocated to everyone. And again, there's probably an elected official somewhere up there that will not be reelected. The first two solutions require courage and leadership, and I would posit that currently that's lacking in our state.
I second that opinion.
The third one is to adjudicate the basins. Somebody has to sue and say that the water is not allocated properly. A judge will decide supply and demand. He will then allocate the limited resources. One problem with this is the judge doesn't know, the judge knows water law but not water science. He then has to make his decisions on dueling lawyers and dueling consultants. The last of the solutions is to let nature take its course, do nothing. And history shows us that once you have a water problem, you then wind up with a food problem, and when that happens, then you tend to get societal collapse. That's not a great solution, though.
You know, I want to stop that last solution from being even on there as an option. It's not an option to just go along with what's happened. I hope you've enjoyed the last 30 minutes of posing a problem. We didn't solve it. We gave you some possible alternative solutions, all of them dark, all of them hard, all of them what we're not ready to do. But we must do it regardless, as they say. If you want to continue this conversation in any way, I'd suggest you go to knxt.wordpress.com. We would be liking to see your reaction to this and your comments. If you want to see this whole program again to digest it a little bit more slowly again, go to youtube.com/KNXT1 and you'll be able to see this program with Dr. Merrill and Dr. Cehrs as they've tried to point out what we don't want to look at, the crisis of the water situation in the valley. We know we have bad air, but would you believe the critical issue, even more than air, believe it or not, is probably water. So if you don't like that problem, do something about it, as they say, and I hope you'll join us in this crusade. Till next week, God bless.